why MACV-SOG were feared by the NVA, Vietnam War. Through dense jungles and unforgiving forests in darkened daylight hours, the Vietnam War was an assault on the physical and psychological senses. Over 20 years, the American and Southern Vietnamese soldiers fought desperately for ground against the North Vietnamese Army, known as the NVA. But while most of the fighting was out in the open, with both sides aware of the other, another, far more secret war was being waged below the surface. The Americans had a secret, an entire group of specially trained clandestine forces able to sneak across borders and into NVA hidey holes that the American military, on paper, could not. These teams were responsible for some of the most successful and top-secret missions of the Vietnam War. They were highly trained, highly dangerous, and highly exposed. So much so that these teams, known as MACV-SOG, had a 100% casualty rate, with every single member being injured at least once. What were MACV-SOG? Formed in January 1964, the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group, or MACV-SOG, was an elite group of special operatives who executed the most secretive missions of the Vietnam War. Operating covertly along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, they crossed into Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam, areas the U.S. government denied its troops ever entered. For 8 years, MACV-SOG conducted highly dangerous reconnaissance, orchestrated psychological operations to spread disinformation among the NVA and their allies, gathered critical intelligence, and carried out prisoner snatches. Two of the most prominent teams that made up MACV-SOG were the recon teams, RTs, and hatchet forces. Hatchet forces typically specialized in raids and ambushes, but also worked as a quick reaction force for the recon teams. Their missions were so clandestine that the whole group's existence remained a tightly guarded secret for more than a decade after the war. But now, declassified documents and surviving members, like prominent MACV-SOG operative John Stryker Meyer, have lifted the lid on some of the most daring missions of the Vietnam War. The 1968 Thanksgiving Day mission. In November 1968, rather than enjoying plates full of turkey and pumpkin pie, Stryker and 5 other operatives were being quietly placed down on Cambodian soil, tasked with tracking down 3 missing NVA divisions. The goal of Team ST Idaho was to get in, find them, and get out without anyone noticing. 3 divisions was equal to roughly 30,000 troops, a number so large that you would think finding and reporting back would be a relatively easy task. But instead of stealthily exploring the terrain and locating the enemy's jungle hiding holes, ST Idaho unwittingly wandered directly into the fray. In the space of minutes, they had gone from totally alone, hiding in the shadows, to being surrounded by temporary military encampments. If spotted, it would be mere seconds before each suffered a very violent death at the hands of the NVA. But smack bang in the middle of everything is a bad place to stay unnoticed. Within moments, a South Vietnamese team member shouted a warning, "Beaucoup VC, beaucoup VC!" and the world exploded around them. Miraculously dodging a hail of bullets, ST Idaho quickly laid down claymore mines at their position before running for it. It was chaos. The NVA were everywhere and the MACV-SOG team could do nothing except run and shoot, meeting fire with fire in a desperate race through the jungle. The NVA probably had no idea they were facing a mere 6 men. Each one fought with the ferocity of 100, using every trick in their arsenal to keep the flood of soldiers back. The other American soldier in the team, Bubba, set up other tripwire claymores as they ran. Then, along with Myers, revealed their position. With sawed-off M79s, they sent rounds of 40mm grenades into the oncoming tide of the NVA, only stopping when the claymores detonated, stymieing their approach. Relief came for the team on their helicopter's return, bearing down on the NVA, and was able to provide covering fire for the men to speed across the exfil site and fling themselves into its belly. With Meyer at the door gunner machine gun, they took to the skies, safely flying away from the now found NVA divisions. Operation Thundercloud. America couldn't have successfully taken part in the Vietnam War without the local knowledge of the country's terrain provided by South Vietnamese troops. With its dense terrain, locals and reconnaissance missions offered a vital insight into where the NVA troops gathered and hid among the foliage. If captured, a Viet Cong or NVA could provide valuable bits of information on northern movements, but if captured, recruited, and trained, that same NVA or Viet Cong could become invaluable. And of course, no war is complete without some soldiers ready to switch sides to better their own chances. So, Operation Thundercloud was born, a classified MACV-SOG mission that aimed to find NVA soldiers who were willing to switch sides and return to the North Vietnam camps as spies. It was the Special Ops' job to recruit and train these individuals before depositing them back behind enemy lines. Organized into 4 three-man teams by Commanding Officer Captain Bud Williams, the soldiers would be given a cover story, fake documents, and surveillance equipment like radios, cameras, and maps. Soon after, they'd be placed down in an area where shortly they'd encounter NVA soldiers who they could beg for a night's respite. Operation Thundercloud was incredibly daring and required a great deal of trust on both sides. Williams, for one, had to trust that these men wouldn't immediately give up the ruse and announce their true intentions to the NVA. If they did, when he came to extract them, he'd find himself walking straight into an open trap. Fortunately for Williams, it soon became apparent that the trust was well placed as the teams gathered plenty of highly useful intelligence and in his own words were, quote, very, very brave young men, and I consider it an honor to have the opportunity to work with them, end quote. Operation Tailwind. In the summer of 1970, American-supported Hmong tribal groups were across the border in southern Laos, trying desperately to recapture key CIA positions. They were suppressed, however, and falling fast thanks to the intense and constant onslaught of NVA troops determined to overrun them. It was a dangerous situation, but one that the MACV-SOG was accustomed to throwing itself into the middle of. In an attempt to divert NVA attention, a hatchet force team was dropped into eastern Laos, where their job was to damage forces, destroy supplies, and extract intelligence. Made up of 16 Americans and 110 Montagnards, the company was supported by heavy air artillery as they laid demolition charges in bunkers. With the NVA alerted, the hatchet team marched, meeting fire with fire on the ground as they came across the opposing troops in waves that continued throughout the night. They did not stop. They barely rested, carrying their injured with them. The company walked through the night and the next day, traipsing across riverbeds and along small paths, regularly facing exposure to the NVA. If they were spotted en masse, it would mean certain death. With shrapnel raining down and men still severely wounded, the company was forced to rest the second night before they continued their long trudge onward to their next mission point. Relying heavily on circling American helicopters to clear a path, the hatchet force attacked the bunkers and base camps, throwing grenades and taking down leftover NVA. It was here they had one of their biggest successes. Uncovering a bunker 12 feet underground, the special forces came across a treasure trove of intel. Maps covered the walls, and documents upon documents were packed into footlockers and squirreled away in pouches. They had stumbled across a major logistical command center. The information in this one place alone would be invaluable. But it was time to get out. By now, half the company were injured, including every American. In just a few short days, they had killed around 144 NVA and wounded 50 more, while the air team had killed approximately 288. On their side, only 3 Montagnards had died. The team moved quickly, pursued by NVA squads, who were held off only by the fortune of the heavy overhead protection given to the Special Ops. The extraction used 72 U.S. fighters and nearly 500,000 pounds of bombs, rockets, and napalm to safely get the hatchet force off the ground and out of Laos. Operation Tailwind's captain, Eugene McCarley, was the last man to climb aboard safely.